I was born in Kiowa, Kansas. My parents married at 17. All of my grandparents and my uncles were farmers. My father was the janitor at school for a good time while I was growing up. My father was one of the smartest persons, and I'm not exaggerating, that I've ever known. I since have wondered what it was like to maybe have the highest IQ in the entire school and be sweeping the floors. My parents were fastidious about us doing well in school, and I swear, from the time that I was in the crib, I believe that my parents were saying, you kids are gonna go to college. Directly behind you is the desk that I built when I was 15 years old. I had no business building a desk, no talent for it, but I had absolutely splendid teachers, and I had great guidance from my parents and the parents of all of my friends. Kiowa, Kansas was a magical place to grow up. I graduated from Fort Hays State. Christy and I had been dating for 4 years, and I wanted to get married. But a part of the deal was that we were moving to Stillwater. So silly me, I thought that I could get a teaching job. 71 was not a good year to get a teaching job in the Stillwater area. So I started applying for anything, and the first job that I had out of college was driving a freight truck in the back alleys of Stillwater. We got a phone call one day, and it was a superintendent at Coweta, and he knew my wife because of her father. Her father is, as far as I know, the only Oklahoman who is in the VOAG Teachers Hall of Fame and the Agriculture Hall of Fame. It turns out that the superintendent at Coweta was a former ag teacher. He invited us to come to his office on a Saturday. He was totally focused on her in that interview. Totally. And at one point she said, what are our chances of getting a job in Coweta? And he laughed and he said, well, what do you think the chances of Ellie Castle's daughter working in my school are? We have openings. And that's when I spoke for the first time in that interview. And I said, what about me? And he said, what about you? What do you think you're going to teach at the junior high level? But I want to hire your wife, so we'll see what happens. 6 weeks later, he called us and he said to me, okay, we have several kids who have difficulty reading. If you'll go somewhere and pick up 9 hours in reading, and then I can hire you, and I will. Sometimes it's divine intervention. I went to Northwestern at Alva, Oklahoma. I enrolled in thinking I would take 9 hours. I would go back for 2 more summers and get a master's degree as a reading specialist. And I started coaching at Coweta, and it was a wonderful experience. But then one day I was looking at job openings, and Oologah popped up as a place that was opening up a high school reading lab. Not that many men walking around with a master's degree as a reading specialist. They offered me a job. I came to Ulaga. After 3 years, I was offered a position in administration, and then when the superintendent who hired me, when he retired, I took his place. I feel like that I was led into education. I mean, it wasn't by happenstance or circumstance. I did not intend to go into school administration at all, but sometimes God is watching out for you, and you have a destiny, and you don't know what it is, but I found mine.
I know that the board at the time was so grateful that he was willing to come to Tulsa to be the superintendent. He was someone who brought, obviously, so many years of education experience and district leadership experience and just knowledge of the state and just the system of education. And so he brought to Tulsa that experience, that knowledge, and also, I think, just really brought an incredible stability to the district when it was very much needed.
I absolutely love Tulsa Public Schools. I loved it. It is a very complex organization, and that there are students on both ends of the spectrum, and that you have to care as much about the superstars as you do the kids who come from a background that impedes their opportunity to learn.
And while he was here, he did so many things. I know there are many different efforts that continue today that we continue to benefit from, like Reading Partners, which is a literacy tutoring program, and Bike Club, which has grown just tremendously even in recent years.
I think for any of us who are in a position of public trust, a lot of the time you know what needs to be done. The question is if you have the political courage to actually do what needs to be done.
I believe that my style was the correct style, as evidenced by the bond issues that we passed. They were significant, and they made a huge difference for kids.
Everybody that looked at the data knew that our population of students in Tulsa Public Schools had shrunk over time, and yet we're still using the same number of buildings, paying for the upkeep and operation of those buildings that could be going into the classroom to support students. I mean, that is a truly politically courageous effort to undertake, and not a lot of other people could have pulled it off like he did.
I really enjoyed my time in TPS. You better enjoy it, because it is a very difficult job. But as one who believes in the power of relationships, communication, listening very carefully to all voices, it was a magical time for me.
One of the best things I feel like I was able to do is, as he transitioned from superintendent of TPS, is to get him to come teach in the program at OU Tulsa. The idea that Keith gets to mentor new leaders coming into education is just priceless.
He was, in my mind, Mr. Educational Administration. He was a pivotal figure in the formation of our doctoral program that has ended up graduating so many state leaders that have gone on to become superintendents, principals, other levels of administration and school systems across the state.
Dr. Ballard is the one that convinced me to enroll at the University of Oklahoma Tulsa campus, and it was an amazing experience. It was a safe place for us to share our experiences, to learn with one another in class, and then get feedback from him on how we might do something differently in the future, or have you thought about? That was a real common question from Dr. Ballard, was, have you thought about whatever it was.
And he always was incredibly generous with his advice, and not, here's how you do it, you're an idiot, but have you thought about this? Or here's something that I experienced.
I've been really fortunate to be invited to come speak to his class a couple of times, and you know, it's just almost comical because I can sit there and rattle off my entire life's lessons on leadership, and he'd be like, oh yeah, we're reading a book on that, and we have a book on that, and a book on that.
Leadership matters. The administrator sets the tone. Just because you climb into a chair does not mean that you're the only thinker in the organization. And if you're not capable of seeing what the world looks like through other eyes, then you're not going to be successful. Be aware of what people think and why they think it. Do the right thing, and you can't make everybody happy, but you can listen to all voices. And I really learned that lesson throughout my career.
His contributions run from, the School Boards Association to, several different school districts, several different individuals that look like me. I can rattle off, 3 other superintendents that worked under him just during, the 4 years that I worked under him.
For me, he's been just a hero from a leadership standpoint. I mean, I think about him less as the former superintendent of Tulsa Public Schools and more just as an incredible public servant and a leader.
I would not be anywhere near having the experiences that I would have if it wouldn't have been for Keith and his coaching and his mentoring. And I am a clear example, and I'm sure there are dozens other leaders across the OU campus, whether it's Tulsa or Norman, who have interacted with Keith and had that same kind of an outcome.
When I think about Dr. Ballard's impact on me, I think about the very positive role model that he's been for me. Not just role model, but mentor. Someone that I looked up to and could say, there are so many characteristics that I want to emulate about him.
His legacy is about leadership. His legacy is about community. His legacy is about making certain that kids have the best of what they need in the time frame that they need it.
Dr. Ballard has always been and has continued to be an incredible advocate for our schools, for our teachers, for our students. And so whether it's at the state level, the national level, or right here in Tulsa, just really promoting the importance of public education and garnering support and appreciation for why it matters so much.
I know that I speak for myself and I speak for countless other educators across the state of Oklahoma and beyond when I say thank you for making such an incredible difference for me personally, for me professionally, for public education, for the Tulsa community, and for the state of Oklahoma. Your influence will never be forgotten.
You asked me how it felt. I hope that I have touched that many lives. I believe that by being an ethical person and listening to all voices, forming relationships, and communicating, that I did touch a lot of lives, but it wasn't just me. It was the people who surrounded me, the people that I was fortunate enough to work with. I know that I've said this 2 or 3 times, that I was following what I was led to do and what I was supposed to do, and I believe that I did it in the right way. Caring about kids who had no control over the situation that they grew up in, and caring deeply about making a difference. I know that I used the term communication and relationships a lot. And I'll say this in answer to your question, of all of the things that I have done, the most meaningful to me personally is teaching.